We're now on Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis, and we're going to show in another brisa contradiction. Vatanya, we learned in another brisa, and there's a whole girsa issue about whether we have Rabbi Shimon's name mentioned here, but in any event, it says Kometz Levona Shechiser Kol Shehu Posel. In other words, you started with a Kometz Levona, and then by the time you're ready for the kmitza and the aktara, all you're left with is 99% of a kometz, and a small particle of kometz is gone. And yet the Brisa says psula. We just finished saying that if you have two kortim left, or according to Reb Shimon, even less than one quart, it's still kshera. And now we're saying no, as long as it was chaser, it was missing one quart, so you don't have a full kometz, it's psula. So Gemara answers tni koret levona shechiser kol shuhu posel. In other words, at this point, the Gemara is going to say that this brisa reflects the shita, the last brisa reflects the shita of Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon is of the opinion that as long as you have a quart left, kshera. And now we're going to reread the Mishnah, or rewrite the brisa, I should say, and it should say, as long as quart levona shechiser kol shehu. Just one second. This is where I got stuck when I prepared the daf. What does it mean, Kurt Levona Shechiser Kolsha? You see, I have a pshat here, but that's going to be the Ibois Ema. Well, let's see if we can go backwards. Let's learn the Ibois Ema, and then we'll see if we can go backwards. Ibois Ema, Kan Bilavona Haba Ima Mincha, Kan Bilavona Haba B'fnei. There are two situations in which a lavona is necessary. One is every classic carbon mincha requires a lavona, because the Torah says, Es kol lavona asher ala mincha. Then there's a situation where a person took upon himself a pledge to bring a lavona for the mizbeach. We once had this in Maseches Vachim with regard to yayin, where a person, instead of pledging to bring a carbon that has to be accompanied by yayin for nisach purposes, he pledged to bring yayin onto the mizbeach. You remember that? I don't know if you recall that, because then you had the whole problem of putting the yayin on the mizbeach, because lo chsif, but you're not allowed to put the, extinguish the fire. But anyway, so here we're talking about a case where he promised and pledged that he's going to bring a lavona on itself. And here's where the brisa says that kometz levona shechiser kol shu posel. The second brisa says it's possible because he took a pledge to bring a certain amount of levona. I guess you'd say a kometz of levona. I think. Let's just see if he points that out. Yeah, a kometz of levona. He says it explicitly. And now, if the levona is missing, then he hasn't fulfilled his pledge, because he took a pledge to bring a kometz of levona. But what was the first answer to the Gemara? Tni koret levona shechisa kolshu posel. He's changing the girsa. Our original girsa was kometz levona shechisa. Now he's saying tni koret levona. But what does that mean? Koret levona shechisa kol shehu posel. So maybe we go back to Reb Shimon for a minute. An idea came through my head now. Let's just see. And Reb Shimon was what said, Al koret echad kshera. He had a koret of Levona. And Rabbi Shimon says that even if at the original moment of Kmitza he had a full kometz of Levona, even if he's left with only a quart Levona at the end, everything else got lost, then the mincha is kshera. But now the Bryce is telling us that koret levona, when he ends up with only a koret, but if it's chisa kolshu, it's missing a little part of the koret, which I can't imagine what that means. It's like splitting hairs because you're only starting with the particle, but I guess the particle is a complete particle and he cuts off a part, then it's psula. And this is going according to Reb Shimon, who says that all you need at the end of the day is a koret of levon. Omar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Shalosh Machlokas, where there are three different opinions amongst the Tanoim. It's a three-way Machlokas about when is it possible, when is the Mincha Psula because of Chisara, because it's no longer complete. Rabbi Meir Savar comments with Chila comments Basov. Rabbi Meir is the simple shita that the Torah requires a kometz from the beginning straight to the end. Anything that got lost, it's not shalem, and therefore it's chaser, and it's possible. I'm not sure if I said it right. Let me say it once more because I don't remember what I said. Sorry. According to Rabbi Meir, you need a kometz of levona from the beginning to the end. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, he disagrees. Kometz v'tchilo shnei krotim basof. He understands that although, and everybody agrees because the pasuk says, "Ve'es kol halavona al mincha," that you need a kometz of levona on this mincha from the get-go. But if it's chaser, as long as you have two kurtim left over of levona, then it's ksher. And Reb Shimon savar kometz v'tchila v'kored echad basof. Reb Shimon is the most makil, and he says that the mincha is still ksher as long as there's one kurt of levona from the kometz that's left over. Shlosh tamikra echad darshan. They all had each one of them had a different take on the pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'es kol halavona sharala mincha." Rabbi Meir savar de isa lavona de ikva bahadi mincha meikara. When it says kol halavona, it's talking about the lavona that was there as ikva. In other words, when they started the process and mixed the lavona together with the flour in preparing the mincha, that has to be kol halavona ala mincha. Even when he finishes the avoda, he's got to have the entire kometz volume of lavona. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, kol. Why did the Torah add the word kol here? To tell you a ribui of afilu chad kart. Just 1 second. What do you mean afilu chad kart? Rabbi Yehuda says you need shnei kartim. Just 1 second. Rabbi Yehuda says ushnei kartim basof. I'm sorry. I stopped prematurely. So again, if we had the word kol, which is a ribui, and we didn't have a miyut, which is coming around the bend in a second, then we would have assumed that the ribui goes to tell me, which is intuitively logical, that all you need left at the end of the process of preparing the mincha is one quart of levona. One quart is like a significant material. But now, es lerabos quart acher. Now, it sounds like it's a kula, but it's really a chumrah. The S is a ribui to tell you that it's not enough to have at the end of the process one quart of levona. You need two quart of levona. And Reb Shimon eslo darish. So Reb Shimon all over Shas refuses to darshan and conclude any halachas from the word S. S is just part of the digduk of the language of the Torah, and therefore he's left with the original premise of kol. And kol, we said, tells me a ribui that all you need at the end of the process is just a quart. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan Machlokes Bilavona Haba Ima Mincha Aval b'levona ba b'fnei atzedivya kol komets v'tchilu komets basof. As we indicated before, that if he takes a pledge to bring a levona by itself, and his pledge included a volume of a komets, he's got to bring a komets from the beginning to the end. And lahachi itzrich asher ala mincha, right? The pasuk said, "V'yeis kol halavon asher ala mincha." Debahadi mincha in b'fnei atzmalo. That when do we say that all you need is a komets of levona at the beginning of the process? That's only because it's al ha-mincha, meaning it's a komets of levona that accompanies a mincha. But if it's a komets of levona that was separated and had nothing to do, was totally independent of a mincha, it was just a pledge that he took upon himself to bring a komets of levona by itself, then if it's missing any part, then it's possible. The Omer Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef Omer Rabbi Yochanan Machlokes B'Levona Ba Mincha Aval B'Levona Ba Mi Bezichin Tivei Akol Shnei Kmotzim B'Tchilu Shnei Kmotzim Basof. We had three shitos about whether the komets has to be complete at the end. Rabbi Meir says it has to be a complete komets throughout. Rabbi Yehuda says all you need is shnei kurtim of levon at the end, and Rabbi Shimon says you don't even need two kurtim, one kurt is enough. Says Rabbi Yochanan that machlokes only applies to menachos. It doesn't apply to the lechem aponim. In the case of the lechem aponim, the Torah requires shnei bazichin, 2 spoonfuls of levona to accompany the lechem. And now everybody's going to agree that you need kmotzim betchila and kmotzim basof. Right? When you started the process of preparing the lechem aponim, you took 2 spoonfuls of levona, which are called bezichin, and you place them on the lechem. And the Torah is saying, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that at the end of the process, when you're ready to take the bezichin off, you have to make sure that they are complete, which means they have 2 kmotzim. So this is basically Rabbi Meir, but applying Rabbi Meir's shita not in Menachos, but in the case of lechem apanim, which is also a mincha. Pshita. Why would you think otherwise? I mean, the process here is sidur and siluk. Ma'od came into bahadi lechem asi. At least at the very beginning of the process, you had a full komets of what? Of levona in each one of the 2 spoons, totaling shnei kmotzim. And therefore, ba'asher al hamincha damya. And it's similar to the case of a mincha. I mean, again, we're talking about a mincha, but this is a different kind of mincha than the classic mincha. And we're going to say that you need that, in the case of lechem aponim, that whole amount of levona that you need in a case of mincha would be sufficient in the case of levona for the lechem aponim, kabash malon. That's what Yochanan wants to tell me no. Pligi barav ami Rabbi Yitzchak nafcha chad omer machlokus b'levona ba im mincha aval b'levona ba b'fnei atzmi divrei kol komets b'tchila komets v'sol. And this is exactly a repeat of what we learned until now, that if you have a pledge to bring a levona, a komets levona by itself, then everybody agrees that you have to bring a komets of levona. As far as the 3-way machlokas, that's only referring to a levana ba ima mincha. According to another opinion, the Gemara says that there's a dissenting view that says that even in the case of a levona above atzmo, we're going to apply the same standards of komets that we would apply to a mincha when the levona is coming to accompany the mincha. Chiser levona affecting Gemara hayater kshera. The Mishnah only mentions in the case of levona that it was chiser, that he didn't have enough of the levona at the end. Why didn't the Mishnah mention yater if there's too much levona? He has more than a kometz of levona. Vatanya, not only that, we have a brisa that says yatir psula, right? If he overdid it, he overdosed on levona, and he has more than a kometz levona, then it passes the carbon. Omer Rami Bar Chama, why did Mishnah leave it out? Kigon shehifish lo shnei kmotzim. Right, the Mishnah is addressing a case where enochinami, if he has too much levona, then it would pass the carbon. Because what did he do? Instead of designating one single kometz of levona for his mincha, he designated two kmotzim of levona for his mincha. Right. Well, I'm sorry, we didn't emphasize one point here that's critical. The Mishnah completely omits the case of yeter, meaning it had more than a kometz. The Brisa, on the other hand, says that yatir's psula. So the Brisa seems to imply that automatically, if you go overboard on the kometz levona, it's possible. The Mishnah seems to indicate not so. So Rabbi Bar Chama suggests that we differentiate between the two cases, the case of our Mishnah as opposed to the case of the Brisa. When the Brisa says that if it's yeter, it's psula, that's where he designated two kmotzim of a levona, and that passes the karma. Our Mishnah is referring to a case where he designated less than a second kometz. But again, that comes back to what I told you before, that there's a tremendous controversy. What does that mean, less than a kometz? Does it mean half of a kometz? Does it mean three-quarters of a kometz? Does it mean any amount past it? Let's just see if he mentions this controversy in the footnote. If he increased the levona by a full kometz, possible. But if the extra levona measures less than a kometz, okay, he's saying now it's anything less than a full kometz, then the mincha is kshera. Then he writes, the reason for this is the subject of much discussion amongst the commentaries. Okay, I don't think we have time for this. We've got to go on and finish this up, at least get to the Mishnah. And the Gemara says, Amar Rami Bar Chama, Hifish Lashnei Kmotzim. He designated two Kmotzim of Levona for his Mincha V'Yovet, Echem Mehem Kodem Kmitza, Lo Hukba'u. The carbon is still kosher because it got lost before the Kmitza. The Kmitza is going to be Koveh. That's going to establish the Mincha. And what's part of the Mishnah, the Mincha? The extra kometz is not part of the Mincha. But Achar Kmitza, if, on the other hand, he had designated two kmotzim and one of them was lost after the kmitza, so it means hukbu that at the time of the kmitza, both kmotzim were established as part of the mincha, and now he lost one of the two kmotzim, then it passes the mincha. The Amar Rami Bar Chama, Hifrish arba kmotzim l'shnei b'zichin. Okay, now normally you have two kmotzim for the two, each one respectively in one of the bezich. And now he went ahead and he designated four kmotzim for two bezich, for two spoonfuls of levona for lechem aponim. V'yavdu shnayim mehem konem siluk bezich. And so there was no kvirus at the time of siluk habezichin, is lo hukbu, and therefore the lechem aponim remains kosher even if two of these four kmotzim get lost. But li'achar siluk bezikin, the siluk of the bezikin, when the following Shabbos they remove the spoons that have the levona in it, that's kovea hukbu, and therefore if he loses those two kmotzim, then it's possible. So the Gemara asks, Hasu lamali, What is Rabbi Bar Chama coming to add? Hainu hach. I mean, this is exactly what we said about a case of a mincha. Now you're saying it in Bazichin for a lechem apanim. It really applies to every mincha. So what's the chiddush yamal? The tema came into barir. Kometz di da. Kemet she gives mana leparka is commanded park dummy. Kamashmalan. Right? There's one man Yomer who says that we learned. I think it was Rabbi Lazar that two blot ago, who said that all you need is not the actual piruk, right? But all you need is this man that's roited, which says 7 hours into Shabbos. I think we said, is then therefore it's commanded prikadami is kamash malan. No, that the lechem apanim is not possible unless the extra levona was there at the time that the levona was actually siluk removed from, even though there was a passage of that 7 hours, which makes it roy lesiluk. Nevertheless, it's not kesiluk dummy, and this is coming lafuke to exclude the shita of Rabbi Lazar, I believe. And I'll double check that in a minute. Okay, then I just want to stop here because we already went a little bit over. Thank you so much. Tomorrow we meet at what time? At 9:30, correct?